eagle slows up in the sky. Pretty soon you'll learn to fly. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. Well, Michael quickly say to me, Mom, you better watch your feet. Lava come down soft and hot. You're loving me now or loving me not. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano comes. Oh, no time to count for what it's worth. 'Cause I just left this planet Earth. Where I go, I hope there's room. I know there's gonna be a lot on the island tomorrow. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. Well, I don't wanna land in New York City. I wanna land no Mexico. Don't wanna land no Three Mile Island. Don't wanna see my skin glow. Don't wanna land Comanche, Skyport, or in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't wanna land no San Juan Airport or the Yukon Territory. Don't wanna land no San Diego. Don't wanna land no Buzzards Bay. Don't wanna land no Iota. I got nothing more to say. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna go when the volcano blows. No, 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 no.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday night. It's Wes Siler with Preserve Navarre Live, and Mr. Joe Kimball's in the house. Joe, thanks
Hey,
for
Wes.
being here.
My pleasure. Thanks
Absolutely.
for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so excited for tonight. We have been doing this show now for, gosh, what's it been? I want to say 4 or 5 months now, Joe, and it's been a lot of fun as we've been doing this, getting to talk to people like yourself, folks that live in Navarre. Every now and then we'll have people outside of Navarre, but we always tend to focus on this area, and I love doing this, man. It's such a fun time. You've gotten a chance to see the studio and what we're setting up. It's starting to come along. This is a live show, so if you're watching live, you can comment. We can see the comments as they come through. Looks like Tom is in here. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Good to see you. We typically have anywhere from like 10 to 20 folks that jump on live, so definitely comment as we go through it. Let me know if the sound is coming through, Tom, and anybody else that's on already. Make sure the picture's coming through because we love to do this thing live. We get feedback as we do it, Joe, get a lot of questions and thoughts that I might not think of, and we get to kind of go back and forth with folks. And then we also record it, and we put it out after the fact so that people can see it and they can kind of catch up on what we talked about each week. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Looks like Nancy says the sound is good. Thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate you being on here. Nancy's on there every time, helping me out and doing this. There's a lot of folks that are actually behind this, making it possible, Joe, because, you know, for a lot of us in Preserve Navarre, we've got, you know, our jobs, we've got our families, we've got everything else that we're juggling. And so having the opportunity to get away, focus on this stuff once a week is a lot of fun. And it's I wanted to go through a couple of those. I always love to highlight some of our sponsors before we get started and give them a shout out, because there's about a dozen at this point that really help us and contribute to the show. One is Elizabeth Kurz. She's an awesome person. She is a business owner. She is an entrepreneur. Her business is coaching. She coaches other business leaders, pastors, charity leaders, I mean, you name it. And she works on mindset. She works on whatever they're trying to achieve with their business. She helps them get a game plan for achieving that, if it's in the short term or the long term. She'll boil down into the subconscious and say, okay, what are you trying to achieve with this goal or that goal? What's your end motivation? And helps folks get there. And then when she was on the show a few weeks ago, she talked a lot about mindset and maintaining a positive mindset and what we're trying to do. How do you do that whenever, you know, you're explaining the same thing a bunch of times or you hit resistance? How do you default back to a positive mindset versus getting discouraged? So, awesome person, great Entrepreneur Navarre. Another one is the Panhandle Shop. So you saw Tom is on there, and appreciate you, Tom, because Tom is one of our sponsors as well. He owns the Panhandle Shop. You can see what they bring to the table, which is these beautiful, handcrafted wooden products. They do flags, they do furniture, they do all kinds of beautiful stuff. Tom and Helen own that shop, and you can hit them there at the Panhandle Shop at Outlook.com and request stuff. They'll do it custom for you. They did some Air Force stuff for me that I loved. That was awesome. But they'll do that for your business or for your home. You got Father's Day, right?
There we go.
Looking at orders for that is a great idea. So love Tom and Helen. They're huge contributors to the show. A couple more. Chaz from Divergent Spectrum. Chaz is just brilliant. He's the one who helped me set up these lights and get this show looking really great like it is. And just an awesome coach. That's him there with Carmen Reynolds. And he does event planning. He does publicity, marketing, connects everybody in Navarre. He's a huge influence in our community already. Only been here for a few years, but he's made a huge splash, and he's a great friend. And then one more, I mentioned Carmen, the Veterans Treatment Court. I don't know if you've heard about this, but Carmen is setting up a charity that's going to support veterans, especially those that are struggling. So, we talk a lot about veterans in our community, given our proximity to Hurlburt and NAS Pensacola and all that. And everybody knows, hey, veterans go through a whole lot of things. One of the things that gets overlooked sometimes is what happens to a veteran if they find themselves low and they break the law in some capacity. They get picked up by law enforcement. Where do they go from there, right? Because they can just spiral down into a very, very dark place given what they were doing, now where they find themselves. The Veterans Treatment Court recognizes this. It looks at, hey, maybe this veteran has some service-related conditions that may not have gone checked, right? May not have been medicated properly, may not have gotten the counseling that he or she needs. The Veterans Treatment Court has some specific tools to look for that and then try to get that person back up on their feet as they pay their debt back to society. So really cool initiative. Oklahosa's got it.
Before?
She has been on the show, absolutely.
So. I thought I was on. I remember.
Yep, she was one of the first people that I had on the show, and she was talking about the Veterans Treatment Court and kind of her heart behind it. Right. She has some family history where her father struggled with PTSD and other things like that. And so one of the things that she wants to do, as a retired lieutenant colonel herself, someone who served, is she wants to give back. And she just has such a big heart for the community, and especially for those people who are down on their luck, people who have gotten into a bad space. She doesn't want them to be forgotten, right? Because once you've served, and we shouldn't forget you. So I love what she's done there with the Veterans Treatment. So those are just some of the sponsors, Joe, that have helped make this a reality and keep it going. So a lot of fun. The reason we started doing this show, and we were talking about it just before we went live, was we really want to showcase the culture of Navarre, the leaders of Navarre. We want people to get to know our group and how much love we have for those people. We want people to get to know us. And so this is just a great place to come every Thursday at 7 and talk to people like yourself, Joe, who have come here, get to know your story, and at the same time talk about some of the contributions you've had to this area. So these are some of those folks, Robert Reyes from Stripes, because and people don't know, right? If they haven't lived here for very long, they may not realize that Navarre isn't just a drive-through community. I mean, we've got NFL stars, we've got entrepreneurs, as I've mentioned, several military heroes. I mean, you name it. It's a beautiful community, and these are just some of the folks. And we get a chance to hang out with them and talk every Thursday.
We live in a great place.
Yeah, we really do. It's an incredible place with incredible people.
And my wife always says, live where you want a vacation.
Right. Yeah, and that was me, Joe. I've kind of told a little bit of my story, but we used to come down here for vacations from Tennessee, and I always dreamed of living here growing up. And when the Air Force gave us the assignment, I was like, oh, we finally got it. This is awesome. And it's everything that I hoped it would be, and just something that I treasure and appreciate, that I've lived in a lot of places, and when you've got a good one. And this is a great one. So it's amazing. The other thing that we do here, Joe, is we love to talk about local events, and I get to highlight one that we just had. So this was our Family Fun Fest. We started doing these more often as a group. We're going to talk about the feasibility study tonight and some of the hard work that we did, and you were a huge part of that, Joe, research and getting out the information. We're at a point now where that information is out. We can always make it better. We're always open to feedback. But hey, we've got the time, we've got the resources, we've got the people to put on some fun events and celebrate the community. And so we did just that last Sunday, and it was a ton of fun. We had over 80 people come out. We were doing little bird feeders for the kids. They can make craft bird feeders. I was grilling away. I did 50 burgers. I did 75 hot dogs, and then a bunch of brats. I did not get to eat one. I just want you to know. I didn't get it.
The griller seldom
I
does,
never know.
right?
But hey, it's a good event. When I finally get done, and I was like, there's nothing left, right? I guess that's good. Like we did our job. And you can see some of the photos there. We had activities for the kids, and we're going to do this pretty often. So if you've got ideas for events for us to do, I'm sure we'll do one of these in the fall, maybe in the spring again. But we love doing that at Preserve Navarre because, that's what we're
Brings
preserving.
the community together.
Yeah, it's the small town feel, man. That's what Preserve Navarre is all about, is saving that for our community, enriching that. So really fun event. So I've mentioned all this stuff, Joe. I've kind of given the run into our group for those who don't know. Talked about our passion for the community. Now we get to talk about you.
Oh, man.
So we're talking about what makes Navarre such an amazing place to live. And that would not be if I missed Joe Kimball, I'd be missing an important part of this, right? So, but talk to me about this, because I always, and folks that have watched this know, I always ask people, send me some photos from your background, history, and some people send me one, some people send me an album. I love the ones like this. Now, I will say I've gotten some that have been black and white. So, yours wasn't there. I didn't have to put color in this one. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. But tell me about this photo, Joe.
That's a picture of me in my surf van.
Okay.
In my younger days, lived in Southern California and surfed and sailed
there.
there.
Get your sunglasses. I got mine here. I'm feeling it. Yeah, I
bet.
got you, man. Absolutely.
You bet. And so that's just
Right now,
one of my buddies took a picture as we were heading off to some beach to surf. So
nice.
That's where that came from.
That's great, man. And
actually,
where was that?
Redondo Beach is the area that I used to surf in a lot. I lived in a place called Inglewood, an inland community, but it was only about 6 miles from the water. Water has been important to me all my life. I love living by the water.
Relate. So my parents loved to go hiking in the mountains and the woods, and they'd stay overnight and stuff. So I remember hiking the Appalachian Trail as a kid, and we did 28 miles, and I was exhausted at the end of it, but my parents were just go-getters. And then we did a couple of vacations like that, and then we came down to Destin and Panama City and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, what are we doing now? We're going to hike the beach? And they're like, no, we're just gonna sit here and enjoy the water, And I was like, wait, that's what we're going to do? They're like, yeah, we're just going to relax. I'm like, I love this. This is where I want to be, right? We're just going to hang out in the water and splash around and have fun. So I totally feel it. Yeah.
Well, I was actually born and grew up my younger years in outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then my dad got a job in California. That's how we got there. And so I grew up there and raised a family there. And as our kids grew up and they started moving out of the state because it became too expensive to raise a family there. It took 2 people working, 2 people or more, and so they said, "Sorry, Dad, but we can't afford to live here." So they started moving out of the state, and it made my wife and I think, well, where do we want to go? And so we actually picked Navarre, and we picked it for some very specific reasons. I mentioned I've been sailing since I was 7 years old.
Yeah, I got a picture of your boat here.
Yeah, I've crossed oceans. Our family. Yeah, another picture of our family on a boat. But our whole family's grown up on the water, and so we used to sail out of Florida, out of the Caribbean, and also California because we had our boat in California. But my wife much preferred cruising in the Caribbean because it was warmer, the water was warm, it was prettier, and so when we started looking for some place to live, we wanted a very specific community. There's a couple of websites that we used to research. We wanted a younger community that wasn't full of traffic and overdevelopment, that had a sense of community, and so we drew a line across the country from where we lived in Southern California because we call ourselves lizards. We don't like the cold. And we said anywhere south of that line we'll consider. But it's got to be by the water. And so we started looking all over for places. I had a good friend here in Fort Walton Beach, Sue Botello. Some of you might know her. She's been here for years and years and years. And I called her to ask her for her advice on if we were thinking of Florida, where would you pick if you could go anywhere in Florida? She said, well, here. And so she said, are you thinking about moving? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, come on out here. We'll show you around.
There you go.
And so we started making trips here.
Yeah.
And because all of the statistics
right.
met what we were looking for when we did our online research. But there's nothing like going to a place
right.
To figure it out. And so we had looked, and Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Mary Esther, and her daughter, who's a realtor, said, you know what, we've been looking at so many houses. Why don't you guys take the weekend off? Go out to Navarre Beach. You'll love it there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we drove out here, and we're like, this is paradise.
Yeah, gorgeous.
This was so awesome.
What year was that, if you don't mind?
2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep. A couple years after I got here.
It still said Florida's
best kept secret.
Best kept secret, yeah. And it really was, because she had to tell us to go here. We didn't even think about it.
Right. Yeah, no, I relate to that so much, Joe, because we had been stationed in Virginia, so close to Virginia Beach and all that stuff, and it was nice, they had Sandbridge and things like that, but I just didn't have the small town feel in Virginia Beach that I knew existed here. Water's a lot colder up there. I mean, they got oysters and things like that that are pretty good, but it just wasn't what I remember from being a kid. My wife is from New England, and so she had a completely different picture of what it was, but I was like, we've got to take a vacation down to this area, to the Emerald Coast. And I didn't show her any pictures or anything. I'm like, just trust me, we're going to go. And I will never forget driving over that bridge into Navarre Beach and her being like, holy smokes, what is this? And I was like, this is what I've been meaning to show you. Yeah. And then just, I was like, it's warm, almost year round, right? Like 8-9 months out of the year. The seafood was different for her. She's used to lobster and all that stuff. I was like, no, we got shrimp, we got snapper, we got grouper. You're gonna love it. Yeah. So just kind of showing her that stuff, and she fell in love with it, and now we're here. You mentioned family, though. I think you gave me some photos of family, and that's such a huge part of it as well. Yeah,
right? That's the most important thing to me.
Absolutely.
Is family. And my wife and I have been married for 45 years. I have an amazing wife. Married way over my head.
She's such a sweet lady.
She's together we've had 3 amazing kids, and we now have 7 grandkids. They're spread all over the time zones in the country.
I got a picture here.
Yeah,
there we go.
There we go. That was our last family reunion. We're having another one here in July, but that was our last one. We all got together in Yosemite out in California.
That's awesome.
But we're anyway. So love our family, and we love seeing them. Unfortunately, we don't get to see them as much because everybody picked different places to live. But that's we're happy for them. They're creating great lives for themselves. So
talk to me briefly about how you. So 2018, you made the decision. I'm trying to remember the first time you came to a Preserve Navarre meeting and started getting involved with us. What led you to that? Do you remember?
Well, I do. My wife and I have always wanted to be, we've always had a goal to be contributors to any place any organization or any place that we live. Yeah. And so I don't remember, I saw something online or something about Preserve Navarre, and so I met you somewhere. It was probably at one of those first meetings. I thought, I'm just going to go and check out, see what's going on here.
Yeah, I have the same feeling because, I came here, and for me it was just a couple years before you did. And I'd known this place, loved it. Now I'm a homeowner, right? I'm not a tourist now. It's my community as well, right? Bought a home, the whole thing. And then I started jumping in saying, how can I get involved, right? What can I do to contribute? And what I realized very early on was what I had bought, what I was holding on to, the community that I had fallen in love with, wasn't going to be the same if we didn't make some changes. That small town feel was going to start to evaporate pretty quickly. Because I was just looking at, you mentioned the statistics and numbers, I was looking at the growth rate of Navarre, and I was like, it's not just me that has found this place, everybody has. And I was saying, well, what can we do to hold on to that best kept secret type vibe? And the other thing is, you're talking about the time frame. You remember Hurricane Sally and Michael, and seeing some of those come through, and what they did to Panama City with Michael, what they did to Pensacola and Gulf Breeze with Sally. I mean, that to me was like, wow, this community, first of all, the growth is off the charts. That can be a challenge if you don't manage it properly, right? It can just
growth is good, but you have to have controlled growth, planned growth.
That's right. Yeah, you have to.
So you got to have the infrastructure in before the growth comes in, or things just fall apart.
You got that problem, and then you've got the potential for a hurricane. And what have we done to prepare for that? Next to nothing.
Evacuation
And so I was like, my goodness, like the community that I love and that I've chosen for the rest of my life, I hope, has some serious concerns and liabilities that could ultimately, if it's a terrible hurricane, destroy it. What can we do to protect this place and preserve it?
And also protect the people that live here.
Exactly. Like, how do we do that with the time that we have, so that our kids look back and say, oh my gosh, what a great place to come visit mom and dad or grandpa. And same thing with my kids is, they're growing up, they're going to school. I want them to be proud of where they went to school and where they grew up and all that. So, I think we definitely relate to that. I have people in the group who've been here their whole life, people that have been here for 40, 50 years, and we still, we can find that place of relating. They'll say, yep, it's completely changed, and a lot of that's good, but there's a lot of struggles that come with it. So,
coming from Southern California, where everything was pristine and perfect all the time, and it was that way because the taxes were super high on everything.
Yeah.
And so they had lots of money and everything was perfect all the time. So we come here and the roads are bumpy and, there's flooding and all kinds of things. And so it doesn't have to be that. That's not part of hometown feel.
Right.
Those things need to be addressed, looked at, and corrected.
Yeah.
And it does take money, but it doesn't take an exorbitant amount of money. It just takes planning for it.
Yeah.
And doing it smart. And the same thing with growth. I've been in the mortgage business for the last 38 years of my career. I started out, I've always been an entrepreneur. I had my own trucking company as a kid, sold it, went to work for my dad who had his own furniture manufacturing business, and for 14 years we grew that furniture company and sold it. Then I went into the mortgage business, had my own mortgage company for a while, and then I started I worked for Centex Homes for 10 years in their mortgage division. And from that, I got to see from a home builder's perspective a lot of different. I wasn't on the building side, the construction side, but I was on the financing side, and they always looked to us to make sure that what they were building was going to be financeable before they put it up. So we got involved in a lot of the pre-development ideas of some of their communities that they built and things like that. A builder loves to build where there are no restrictions.
Right.
Because it's cheap and they can make a lot more money.
Sure.
But that's not the best thing always for the community.
Right.
And so there's a balance of having the builders participate in putting in the infrastructure for the new homes that are going in so that the rest of the community doesn't have to bear the burden for that lack 100%. Of planning.
Yeah, and you see that. So you kind of mentioned California, where you came from. I mean, you go down the street, right, to Gulf Breeze, right? And you can just see, you can go over to Alabama. One of my favorite little towns to visit is Fairhope. It's just an hour away, right? And it's gorgeous. And people who say, well, all cities have to inevitably, lead to what Destin has. No. There's a complete diversity.
We don't want to be Destin.
There's a complete diversity.
At least our survey doesn't indicate that.
No, it doesn't. We're going to get into
that.
Yeah. But I look at places like Gulf Breeze. I look at Fairhope. There's a lot of different cities out there. And you say, what are they doing? And it's just like you said. They're involving the community, getting them engaged. What do you guys want? And then they're saying, okay, for the builders and developers that are active in our community, this is what we want you guys to do. Here is, the requirements we have. We want to do a city project to work on stormwater mitigation. We want to bury our power lines. We want to, resurface our roads. We want to build sidewalks. We want to do all this stuff, retention ponds, all that. You see it happening in our county, right? And that's the motivation and the desires to say, hey, there's some steps being taken that will serve this community well, and so that other people can have the same experience that we did when we moved here years ago, right? So that kind of leads us to the feasibility study that we worked on together. And you were one of many folks that was active in this. But I also want to talk a little bit about some of the early stages, because for me, kind of coming here, kind of like you did, just have fallen in love with the place. I said, I've got these ideas about, what can preserve it for generations to come, but I wonder if other people do. And I started to research the movements and the history of Navarre incorporation efforts. And I learned that there had been attempts before. The most recent at the time was in 2014. And so I said, it was 2020, about, 2019, I think is when we first started to work on this. But then 2020 and then 2021 is when the group started to pick up. I said, hey, let's do a survey and let's see how the locals feel. Because what I don't want to do is force this on anybody, right? Me coming from, I was from Alabama, then, in Maxwell Air Force Base. Before that, Virginia, as I mentioned, right? and then grew up in Tennessee. As an outsider coming in, now a homeowner, I don't want to be bringing in all of my ideas and telling everybody else how to live if they aren't open to it, if they don't want it, right? And so we started doing a survey before we even got to a feasibility study. And a lot of people don't realize that is that the feasibility study didn't just come out of nowhere. It came out of us asking, our neighbors and our friends,
asked everybody to prioritize what was important to them, and we accumulated all that data.
Exactly. So this was what it looked like. It was 2021. We released this. It was active for over a year. The first 3 to 4 months was, when we invested the most in getting the word out and getting the input we needed. We had over 3,000 people take the survey. It was on yournavarre.com. It was for residents only. And what we did was we hired a team, and we had a bunch of academics from Dominion University up in Virginia, and they looked at it. They verified everybody's address and say, yep, this is good. So there, in case somebody took it, multiple times or whatever. What was really interesting is that they would tell me there was quite a few people who would take it, and then you could tell they went and researched, and then they would take it again, and they
didn't they track it by IP address? Isn't that how
So we asked people when they took the survey, please put in your address, right? Just your street name, right, and then your name, so we can track, who's going where. So whether you're a registered voter or not, we still wanted to get everybody's feedback. Now we broke it down for registered voters versus the population, but we didn't see a lot of difference, overall. So we just said, hey, we're looking at the addresses. We just want to verify your addresses in Navarre, right, and then we don't have duplicates or whatever. So we had a team do that, and they published their results. But what it showed is exactly what we've been talking about, is that people love the beaches. This talks, we asked the questions, what do you like most about Navarre? And we had them rank order them. Beaches, the military friendly, the small town feel was a big one, the lower taxes. We had people that could write in their comments. And then they said, what do you like least about Navarre? And they talked about the traffic, right? The limited infrastructure, not all the businesses that we want, all the things that you can hear, right? Just by, asking people walking around and all that. But this kind of got the numbers behind it. It also showed us what services people would want, right? So we had them rank order that. And sure enough, you've already mentioned it, infrastructure being the biggest one. People wanted help with infrastructure and stormwater management. They want, better access to side roads in the event that 98 has an accident and all those basic things. The businesses wanted support. They wanted, and then people wanted to see more community events. People asked me, how did you determine the boundaries for your city? We asked people, we said, hey, if you were, going to be part of the city, what boundaries would you want to include? And so we had different map options that they could pick. Do you want the beach to be part of it or not? And it was interesting to see, because we could see the entire results, and then we could see what those communities felt about themselves.
Do they want to be
included in it? That's right. So we asked those questions. And then at the end of it, we said, okay, how supportive are you of Navarre becoming a city? And we saw 66%, right, had a high rating on this on a scale of 1 to 10. We also could break that down by community. So when people ask, why isn't Holly included in it? Well, they had the lowest by far in terms of participation and then interest in incorporation. So that was very telling. Whereas all the other areas had a higher rating, right? So, and higher participation. So we started this survey because I didn't want to come out here passionately making speeches up at the county and with our team and, spending enormous amounts of time on this effort unless it's what the people wanted. And so when I get the feedback,
it would never be successful if
right.
people don't want it.
Exactly. I'm not a salesman. I'm a military guy, right?
You can't force it on them.
Right, exactly. And so this kind of gave me, okay, there is a need for this, right? There's an absolute desire for this to happen. People understand it. We did speeches at the Chamber of Commerce. There was 2 chambers of commerce at the time. We went to both of them. We went up to the county. We talked to people about it. We talked to our state rep. We did the whole thing of going around saying, okay, people want this to happen. And there was a lot of interest in the issue and how this was going to be. And so we said, okay, there's enough there for us to form a group and to focus people to do this, right? But now we look at what does it take for this to happen? And that's where we looked at a feasibility study. Right? And this is the part where you came in, Joe, and really, really helped us, because what I did, and I'll kind of skip ahead to a couple of these pictures here, but what I did was look at the actual law, right, that is required for a city to incorporate. And you can look at that online, and I can put the comment or put the link in the comments, but the actual laws for incorporation are very clear. They're in the Florida statutes. You can see the most recent ones here. And they actually tell you hey, if you're going to incorporate, you need to have a study. And then they list the criteria for that study. There's 11 different things that a study has to fulfill, as you well know, being on the team that we formed. And I said, well, hold on a second. If the state law tells me exactly what we have to have in the study, then why pay $40,000 for a company to do it, right? Nowhere in those statutes does it say, and you have to hire a firm from Tallahassee or Orlando or wherever, right? They're like, it doesn't say that. It's simple. And then what I did, Joe, is I looked at some of the older studies, because there's been 2 studies, at least, the 2 that I know about, in terms of incorporating Navarre. And those 2 studies, going back 2014 and then 2006, are online and available. We've got copies of them. So I read them. And I was like, this is not rocket science. Like, you don't have to have a PhD to understand what, these guys are saying.
And they spent money on those, right?
They spent thousands on these. And I'm glad that they did, because it showed, that it's possible. It proved that it was feasible. It gave us a running start on what we were going to do.
Yep.
But it doesn't change the fact that the state law gives you the criteria for anybody, right, to put this together. And it doesn't say it has to be this particular company or it has to be done by someone that we pick. No, it's just you meet the state requirements and then you do the thing, right? So that leads us to where we formed the team. And you recall that. Is we put together a team of members and academics and anyone else that was interested in this, that had expertise that was relevant, to be able to say, we're going to take these studies, we're going to take the information there, and then we need to do our own research, figure out what's the latest information, see what more we can find, and put that together. So I don't know if you remember coming to some of these meetings that we did, because so let me show you a couple of these real quick. So these are just some photos from 2021 and 2022 when we did a year's worth of meetings over at St. Sylvester, bringing in experts. So which ones do you remember off the top of your head? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you've been to a few of them.
I don't remember the police chief's name.
So Bob Johnson, that was a great one.
That was a great one.
And then that's the property appraiser.
Yeah, I was at the property appraiser, and
Greg Brown Jr.
I think I was at all 3 of them.
So
there were like 6 or 8 of them.
Yeah, if you recall, we would open these meetings. They'd go for about an hour, and then we would say, hey, we are systematically going through all the topics of a feasibility study, and then we would get the best expert we could to come and teach us, hey, what we needed to know, and then build a relationship with them. So with Bob Johnson, the question was, hey, man, we looked at our surveys, and people feel pretty good about law enforcement, right? It's unlike infrastructure, people feel like they're being served moderately, if not, by what he's providing. There's not this huge demand for those services. So what are our options here? Because we don't want to charge people a bunch of taxes for law enforcement when they're already feeling good about it. And he was like, you contract. Easy. Like, we'll work it out with the county. You guys get to that, point. My office will be happy to help, and then we'll contract your services. We can give you a little bit extra support, a little bit more focus if you're incorporated. We'll have someone to talk through, the mayor and all that kind of stuff, city council. But in terms of like having to set up a whole new department from scratch, no, you won't have to do that. I was like, oh, great. So that's going to cut out a lot of tax money that we would have had to pay to set up a whole new station and everything else, right? Because it'd be very expensive from what we looked at. So just an example, we went through that with fire chiefs, we went through that with infrastructure, right? When we talked about taxes, making sure that our tax rate wasn't completely offering anything, bringing in Greg Brown, looking at the the value of homes and how they've changed over time, how they're calculated, all those things, making sure we weren't going to lose our exemptions. That's something that they talk about in the anti-ink sign. It's just not true. They say, hey, you're going to lose your homestead exemption. You're not. You're not. And we confirmed that with him, right? So making sure that we were doing this right and bringing in the experts, so it's not just coming from us. And then when it came to the actual, and you can actually see, I got to mention this as well, Joe, is that the record of a lot of those meetings is on our website. You can actually go back, because I was posting what happened in those meetings, the records that we had and all that stuff in our website. If you go under more and then research, you'll see that, right? So the record of those meetings still exists, and you can see how they built up. The infrastructure one was great. We had Jerry Cooey up there. He was talking about it. Carmen Reynolds was there. We looked at all of the stormwater mitigation techniques that we could find that would be of value to Navarre, understanding how rain gardens work and how retention ponds work and how you can have public land that doubles as entertainment but also prevents flooding, right? And then looking at where Santa Rosa County's priorities were and where they were spending their money at the time, building a big courthouse on Avalon Boulevard, and working on more stormwater mitigation in the north end than the south end gets, and then looking at how they worked with Gulf Breeze to get their stuff done.
I remember contacting the county and verifying numbers and research and data, and to make sure we had everything right. And so lots of calls and contacts with people that were actually doing it to verify everything that was in the study.
Right, exactly. And that was a lot of it was when the numbers are dependent upon the county, we had to contact them, right? And so a lot of it was dependent on them being forthcoming with information, right? Which was a big part of it. And I also realized, Joe, that, you know, as we were going along, you know, with this effort, there was always going to be a need to update the study.
Yes.
Right?
It's like a business plan.
Yeah, I see, like Dorothy's on here.
It's a working document.
So Dorothy's on here, and she says, why were there inaccuracies in the study, right? And it's a perfect chance to respond to that, because when you're looking at this information in the study, first of all, you can always update it because things change every day. And that's part of the reason that I love the way we did the study, is we have the ability to update it as that information changes. We don't have to go back and spend another $10,000 to affirm for something that we can update on our own.
Right.
And at the second time, as we learn more information from the county, because you're not always that forthcoming with information, right? A lot of times they themselves may not know exactly how this or that is spent. And so you would get more information, tell us, because then we're going to go update the study and we'll get it accurate. And that's always been our commitment. I've seen efforts like Perdido Key where they have been trying to incorporate Perdido Key. They paid the money for a consulting firm, thousands of dollars.
Had to go validate it afterwards.
And then they say, hey, you know, even though you spent $40,000 on this study, we found something inaccurate, right? We're going to drop your study. And I'm thinking, okay, if they're going to play that game and they're going to find anything in the study that they don't like, then let's do it ourselves so that when they accuse us of that, we can fix it tomorrow and then make it better, right? So that was part of the calculus as well.
I also got to say, Wes,
go ahead.
You've provided great leadership.
Thanks, man.
because you've been focused on, let's get this right, let's do the research, and find the answers and the solutions that will make this a better place to live. And so in every phase, you've been very diligent to make sure that everything was being done right, that we double checked, and so.
My big commitment, Joe, is because people know that our group is funded by locals, right? Preserve Navarre is membership based. So when you spend the $90, right, to become a member, we take that seriously. We take your money seriously, and we want to demonstrate fiscal responsibility, right? Being smart with money, something that you've done obviously in your life with your successes. We want to demonstrate it as a group, and we want people to know that a city is going to do the same thing. Right. So to me, spending $40,000 on a feasibility study when, I don't know, 2 already exist, and we have the capability with people like yourself to do it ourselves, just saved us $40,000, right? And we got the same result, which is a study, if not a better result, in the sense that we own this thing. Now we can update it, and if people want to, you know, take shots at it or tell me that it could be better, then we can fix that ourselves, right? Without spending even more money. So it's about being smart with our money, and now we have more money to invest in other things like getting our group's name out there, having fun events for the community, so forth. So that was a big thing for me. So I don't want to spend all of our members' money on something that we can solve elsewhere. It's the same thing with taxes, right? Like, do you want to just go and spend your property taxes, you know, on a project when you can get a grant from somebody else, from the state or the county? That's how we want the city to function as well, is just because something has to be done, is there a smarter way to do this that doesn't cost people as much money? So that's part of just the principle of fiscal responsibility. All right, so we got about 10 or 15 minutes here. I want to walk through some of the study itself, because it's a long document, right? And I don't want to bore everybody here, so we're going to go quick. But I do want to go through a couple of the high points, because I think it's important for people to see if they don't have the time. You know, we got kids and running around and everything. You got friends and family and a job. So I just want to hit a couple of the high points with this study to show people what it's about, what it says, and then you can make up your mind for it. Give us feedback. Read the whole thing yourself if you like. But there's some important parts of this that people need to realize. The study itself outlines what the city is going to be in terms of boundaries, right? So we believe the beach should be included with the mainland in Navarre. We think it's all Navarre. So we call it the city of Navarre Beach.
And West, the beach wants to be included too.
Yes, they do. Yeah, there's a huge
according
part.
To the survey.
Huge part. Yeah, there's a huge portion of the leaseholders that want to be involved, the residents down there want to be involved, and there's several folks on there who think that they can incorporate the beach themselves. But that's going to be extremely difficult when that land is owned by Escambia County. So good luck, right? Like, it's owned by Escambia, leased by Santa Rosa. They don't actually own the property that their houses are on, and that's a huge struggle for them. And so trying to incorporate that on their own is a huge, tall order. And I've told them, hey, listen, we're stronger together. Navarre is stronger together if we work together on this. They need us, we need them. We need the beach to be part of this because these guys, I mean, they just have the most beautiful, land area in the entire state that we all go to, right? Yeah. We feel a sense of ownership. I can't tell you how many hours, Joe, I've been on the beach cleaning up cigarettes with the sea turtle cleanup and everything else and having events on there. But at the same time, there's limitations for the beach because they don't have that many people, actual residents and voters there, right? There's a lot of people there who, they just have their house or whatever. Yeah, what you get from the mainland is you have thousands and thousands of people in places like Holly by the Sea, and there's your taxpayers, right? There's your tax base of people who have homes of moderate to high value, and a lot of folks, a lot of voters in the mainland area of Navarre. And then, of course, we all come together in places like Navarre Park for Memorial Day or what have you, right? So there is a difference, and I'm not trying to overshadow the difference between the culture of the beach versus the culture of the mainland, but that difference is not so significant that we can't overcome it to work together for both of us, right? For all of us. There's a difference between, I don't live in Holly by the Sea. I live east in East Navarre, so I'm not in the big HOA, and I hear all the drama and stuff. It sounds terrible sometimes. But I can tell you there's a difference in our culture on the east of Navarre versus Holly by the Sea. But hey, we're still Navarre. We're way different than
both areas want the same thing, to preserve our culture and to make this a great place to live, to preserve the great place that it is to live. So,
right, and we figured out smart ways to do that in negotiations with the beach. Some of this is actually relatively new. We figured out ways for the beach to hold on to, if we're going to get tourism revenue, those guys are going to get the discretion to spend it because that tourism revenue, by and large, is being driven by the beach, right? So that makes sense to me as you guys spend it on beach renourishment, right? We figured out ways for them to retain a lot of their property tax because their home values are higher. They don't get access to ours, but they keep a lot more of their own through a special district type function, right? So they've got some committees of their own just to protect their local culture because they're not going to have their own city council member, right? They're going to have to split. They don't have enough people. So they're concerned about, hey, the mainland's going to dictate, what we can do, and then at the same time, people on the mainland's like, is the beach going to tell us what to do? Well, it's a compromise, right? Much like America,
like life,
all the colonies had to come together,
like a marriage,
right? And everything else, exactly, everything else. So it's a compromise. So we take that into account as well, and trying to respect their differences. This is an important one. This is the revenue. This is getting into where the money comes from. And I'm actually going to pull this up, so you guys are not going to be able to see us for a second because I want you.
We picked that apart a lot.
Yeah, I know you spent a lot of time on this, and so did everybody else involved with it. So you guys won't see us, but I want you to see some of the numbers here. So I'm going to go through a couple of these, Joe, and then we can kind of come back and talk through it. So the CRA is probably the biggest and most important part of this study, okay? And we've done an entire show on redevelopment, and I'll probably do more because I cannot talk about this enough, Joe. When you talk about using money that's already in the system, the CRA is that. So you see this, it says $8.4 million of the city funds comes from the CRA. What the CRA does, and Gulf Breeze, they're just the masters at this. I mean, they are some of the best in the state at this, but not the only ones. A CRA says, okay, we're going to look to redevelop property. As opposed to Wild West building where there's nothing, a CRA comes in, it sees property, and then it says, hey, we're going to invest in this, and then we're going to save the earnings from that, and we're going to reinvest that as well.
So for those that don't know, CRA is Community Redevelopment Agency.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what it is. Yes. I'd love it if Santa Rosa County had one. They're one of the few counties in the Panhandle that don't. Gulf Breeze has a CRA. It gives them access to funding at the federal and state level, and they say, hey, we've identified areas of land, especially along 98, that are struggling. Right? They need investment.
And that money has to be used for those 100%. CRA projects.
Exactly. We're going to take that money, invest it here. Here's our plan, right? And then based upon that property appreciating, we're going to be able to keep the proceeds, right? That's what a CRA does. And the thing about Navarre is you can just look right down the street at Gulf Breeze and their CRA and see how so much of our property meets the exact same criteria, right? And I've gone to conferences and stuff with Gulf Breeze city officials, and we sit there and we have all of these people coming by saying, oh man, Navarre, there's so many beautiful things that can happen there, and wouldn't it be great to do this and the other when it comes to stormwater mitigation?
Right.
Oh, you guys could do this. You could bury your power lines, and don't you know how much better it's going to be when a hurricane comes, because you won't be losing power at nearly the same rate at all. All these other things that they can do that Gulf Breeze is currently doing in order to preserve that community. CRA is a huge part of that. So, and you see how much money is in there. So when people go to the property tax, which I'll talk about next, look at the difference. So the property tax is something an additional. We've been upfront about that, just under $1 million property tax at $4.3 million, right? But that over almost double that is coming from your CRA, which the CRA is not a new tax. So you look at the same thing with the half-cent Florida sales tax, the service taxes, municipal sharing, lost option. You see a lot of the billment permit fees. A lot of these funds, Joe, are coming from existing revenue. It's just that Navarre doesn't get a share of that.
Navarre doesn't get it. They go to the county and they get to spend it however they decide.
Exactly. So that franchise fee tax, for example, that's already being charged. That's not a new tax. Businesses are already being charged that. We're just not getting any receipts from it locally, right? Unless the county chooses to spend money down here. Municipal revenue sharing. The county gets it. Gulf Breeze gets it. Jay, Milton, right? There's no one in Navarre that is receiving that money just for us. We have to go ahead and petition for the county to please spend it here.
And why don't they spend it here?
Well, so
you and I talked about that a little earlier.
We have, yeah. So to a degree, there is some spending here, but it's extremely difficult. If you talk to Ray Eddington, we've had him on the show. He'll that guy's working his butt off, like trying to get stuff done, but he's got to go up against 4 other commissioners who have other priorities.
But you also mentioned staffing, that the
staffing is a huge part.
The city has its own staff.
Exactly.
And the county does not have the staff to implement some of these things.
Right. They have a staff,
so they go through the cities that do have the staff.
Exactly.
So that's where the money goes.
Exactly. Like when you look at the county staff, they have, again, the entire county to worry about, right? They've got 4 other commissioners in there telling them to do this, that, and the other. A lot of the anti-ink folks, they'll say, oh, a city staff is useless. Like, they don't do anything. I'm like, a lot of those people are like veterans. Like, like they've worked hard in their life. Like, you're going to tell me that they're useless on a city staff? A lot of those people are just good folks who work hard. You're going to tell me that in Gulf Breeze their city staff doesn't do anything? Because I can prove you wrong all day long. The city staff is what you need to execute a project. Because you can throw money at something all day long. I mean, it's like I could throw money at, like, my house, right? Like, but if I'm not there to, like, coordinate who's going to come and help fix some of the infrastructure in my home, if I don't tell them what I want, show it while they're working, make sure that they did a good job, how good's the work going to be? I experienced this actually, Joe, personally, because we've got a place up in Alabama that we rent out. When I was deployed last year, I wasn't there, right? Like, so I was having to work through phones and stuff and, like, spend a whole bunch of money because I couldn't go up there and solve stuff for them whenever something would break. I had to pay somebody every single time, but being here, I can travel up there for my renters and I can fix something for them, or I can make sure that it was done right. That's what a city staff does in a much bigger scale for your area, is they say, cool, thank you, county, we're going to take this money, we're going to spend it here, and we'll make sure it gets done properly and on time, right? As opposed to, like, the commissioners chasing around the contractors, why is it so late, I could go through all of these in more detail at some point, but you see the source. So that's the point, right? You see the source for a lot of these things is coming from different areas, and that's what we're talking about. Is when when we say 70% of the revenue is coming from other sources, it's important for people to understand that. And what we did was talk to other city officials, study their budgets, and say, okay, these guys are using all these revenue sources. So can we?
And we looked at various cities, relatively the size, some a little smaller,
Winter
some
Springs,
a little bigger.
In Florida. Winter Springs in Central Florida.
And talked to them and studied what they were doing and looked at their budgets. So
absolutely. So that's the revenue. Now, when you look at expenditures, this is kind of what we propose as what the city should spend its money on. And again, it goes back to that survey, man. It goes back to that survey of what do the people want. So this isn't Wes House talking. It's not you. As you know, you were helping put this together. You were using that survey information to say, okay, rank order the priorities, right? We're not going to have City of Navarre police because people they're not hurting for it. They're not demanding it. They feel pretty safe. But they are hurt when it comes to flooding and everything else. So let's make that priority number one.
Some of the roads. And,
And you see that, and we'll have to do a whole show that goes through these in more and more detail. But you notice that the general fund there, that's for doing things like community events and all that kind of stuff, setting up your zoning and planning boards and all of that, having some basic functions for Navarre. But that infrastructure fund is $14.4 million. This is by year 5 as the city starts to build up into its full services. You can see where that money's going. There's some money for housing and equity and a few other funds, contingency funds on there. That infrastructure budget, I could do a whole show on that, of just showing you the detail of where we put that money. A lot of it is staff. That's a huge part of it. People say, well, that doesn't count to infrastructure. It absolutely does, because that's...
So you need people to build the infrastructure.
You need the grant writers and all that stuff, right, to help you get those grants, and then you really need the city staff to take the money that's already out there, hurting, and bring it home. And I can't wait to talk to Joe Rubman. I think we're going to have him on here pretty soon. But our state representative talks about this. He's like, there's money out there. Yeah. There's money in the state, coffers. There's money in the county. But who's executing it for Navarre? And it's got to be more than just one guy on a board of 5. So we could go through some of those details, but it's what you think. The infrastructure fund is there to be able to help when it comes to traffic, when it comes to flooding. Economic development's a huge part of this, making sure businesses have what they need, helping them with having events where they can market their work and get out into the community and get to know folks, supporting the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I could go on and on with the services that we have. But that really is the point, is using as much money as possible that already exists to get us the better services than what we currently receive. And so when people tell me, well, hey, you need to do an official study. First of all, what we did meets all the requirements to be official. Second of all, it's not required to be done by a third party. And then third of all, we're smart because we do things with fiscal responsibility, not spending money in a wasteful fashion. And that's what you see right here in the feasibility study. So I'm not going to go out there and say it's perfect. I'm sure there's things we can update, Joe.
There always are.
But I'm proud of the fact that we've modeled it after cities like Gulf Breeze and many others who spend their money well, and that's what we want to see here.
And so many people that I talk to, our friends and church friends and things like that, one of the things that they're most frustrated about with government is that they don't spend money responsibly.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to do that and getting feedback, getting pushback from the opposition. And I wish we could just work together on it.
Right. So there's a lot there. You said a whole lot in a short time. The whole, because I see people painting with a broad brush, like all government is terrible.
Yes, it's not.
It provides no value. I'm like, well, ouch. First of all, so the military doesn't provide any benefit to you at all. Like, come on, like some government public teachers, like firefighters, like cops. Come on, somebody at some level is providing some value. And again, you can see that in cities down the street. So, when it comes to, all government is useless, I don't believe that at all, right? Like I believe in what people do when they serve. So. But there is waste in government.
Yes,
and like
absolutely.
you talked about wasteful spending. Yes. To me, so just talking, I personally am a conservative Republican. I believe in limited government. Yeah. I believe when government is focused, right, that's when it's effective. And the more focus and limitation you can bring, the better it's going to be in terms of its accountability. Yeah. The other part of it is being transparent and showing people, hey, this is where it came from. And that's kind of the thing with our study is, I absolutely believe if we just hired a company and that was it, then people would be attacking that company and they'd be saying, why should we trust them, or da-da-da-da-da, right? Like what we've done with our study is I just showed you, and you already knew this, but, and what we've done is how we built it and what our thought process was, being transparent about all of that, right? So being transparent and then focusing the government that we have at the local level down to a city where they can marshal the resources. And now, they talk about this in Gulf Breeze a lot, Gulf Breeze is a relatively small area. That makes it a lot easier to figure out what the problems are and solve them. Yeah. When you talked about the staff up at the county, I can't imagine having the entire county to worry about. It's a big county. I mean, it goes way up there north, right? Yep. And it's very different when you go north of J, as opposed to, hey, we're going to shrink this down to Navarre, and then we're going to have like our little precincts and our city council folks for each area of Navarre. You can get across Navarre when the traffic's not terrible in about 10 or 12 minutes, right? You can see all of the problems. Getting across the county is going to take you an hour, right?
Or more.
Exactly. So focusing government down and saying you are not responsible for all the county's needs. You're responsible for just Navarre. And guess what? Its needs are already specified. Flooding, traffic, right? Lack of support for businesses. Solve those needs. Don't try to be everything to everyone. So focusing government to me really is the answer, which is why I believe in this home rule power that we talk about.
And I agree. Wes, you made a comment about you're a conservative Republican, and as am I. And I have friends that aren't, that are liberal Democrats. And what I find is that although we might have differences on how we think things should be accomplished or what should be accomplished, everybody wants fiscal transparency, accountability, and responsibility, regardless of political affiliation.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing, is that if we're going to create a city, we have to create a city that is going to have integrity, accountability, and be fiscally responsible. And so what you're saying, and that's one of the things I do appreciate about your leadership, is that fiscal responsibility. It's got to be built into anything that we create.
Right. Yeah. You can see kind of what we're, in terms of the incorporation campaign, we put out reports to the county, right? I just did the most recent one with our treasurer, put that out there so you can see what we're spending our money on, the whole thing. A huge part of this show is trying to be transparent and show people, and hence having, like the comments and everything else, and having the different guests is showing people exactly, what our thought process is. You mentioned a couple other things in terms of like the resistance. I think there are people who really have a sense of ownership of Navarre that are on the anti-incorporation side, and they're just scared because they don't understand it. And they're like, who are these people? What are they trying to do? Right? They don't know us personally or whatever, and they're worried about losing the community that they love, which I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I feel. We actually have very similar values in terms of trying to preserve the community, right? So there's those folks, and I have all the patience in the world for them. Unfortunately, Joe, there's also some bad actors out there. There's some folks out there who they just want the county to maintain control of Navarre. They don't want anything to change.
For personal reasons.
For personal reasons. They've gotten powerful over time, and they just don't want anything to change that's going to threaten their power, because they know if there's a city, then resources are going to change. It's going to be the third biggest city in the Panhandle after Tallahassee and Pensacola. It's going to be it can be a very powerful entity to take care of folks in Navarre and provide for those needs, and that could shift people. So now all of a sudden, hey, some of these promises that I made, I'm not going to be able to make again, because now all of a sudden Navarre's going to have a seat at the table. It's going to want, you're not going to be able to push this to the side. That's going to change a lot of folks, and they're going to have to reevaluate their strategy. But I talk to those folks every day. I think more and more of them are starting to come around and understand, hey, this doesn't have to destroy everything else for Navarre to have a city. We can find compromise. And that perfect example was the beach.
I know
folks,
this is idealistic, but I'd like to think that our politicians really have the best interest of the people that they serve in mind. And I think we've had too many examples where that's not true. And so with a broad brush, people say, all politicians are that way, and they're not.
Right. Yeah,
they're not. And I think the closer that you get to home,
I just have to say this. Like, I don't get a chance to talk about this, but if you think that all politicians are the same, then I'd be very curious as to how you're going to vote in November. They couldn't be more different. Anyway, I'll leave that. I'll let that go. I'll let that go. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
But there are good politicians, and I think that it gets harder and harder to maintain the focus on what does this community want, the bigger that you get. Like when you go out to the county, they're concerned about Navarre and Pensacola and Jay and Milton and Gulf Breeze and everybody else. And so the community that, for lack of better terms, screams the loudest gets the most.
Right.
And so we want to change that by being one of those cities that are getting what we need to make our community strong.
Well, so we had, I was talking to the state rep, right? Joe Rudman, who's up in Tallahassee, and then he comes back here pretty often. And he was like, you should see my schedule, Wes. He's like, I have the mayor of Milton. I have the mayor of Gulf Breeze. I've got the city manager of Crestview. I've got a city council person from Jay, right? Like, he's like, that's my schedule, is I have all these people who are calling my secretary saying, hey, give me an appointment with the state rep. And what they want to talk about is, hey, we got this project. We got this project in Jay. We got this project in Gulf Breeze.
No, you didn't mention anybody from Navarre.
Exactly. That's the point.
That's right. We don't have anybody.
We don't have anybody. So these people come up with these projects, and they say, hey, this is what the citizens want in my area. And then they say, the state has funding for this. They've got a grant for this, right? And then they travel to Tallahassee. They meet with the state rep, and they say, hey, if you can advocate for this, then we can get several $1 million from you, and the city staff are going to go execute it. We'll take it from there, right? And he's like, cool, let's do it. Yeah. And you'll see that because they just came out with the budget, right? So you're going to see, hey, Gulf Breeze just got more. Pensacola just had an amazing day. If you think, and I saw Dorothy put a comment here, it's the same services, go look at Pensacola and what just happened to them today is they just got massive amounts of grants for several projects that they're trying to get done. Show me that in Navarre. Yeah. Show me the infrastructure projects in Navarre. And I'm not talking about paving a single road, okay? Yeah. I'm talking about what are we doing to prepare for the next Hurricane Sally? Yeah. And then what anti-incorporation people are going to say is, well, go up to the county commissioners and just beg 5 people who don't live in Navarre to please protect us from a hurricane, right? When is that going to happen? And God bless them, Reddington's up there saying, we don't get enough services. We need to be doing more. And the guys just say, yeah, okay, come up with a project, Ray, and let us know when you're going to do all the work, right? You don't see that, but what you do see is the cities advocating for their folks, right? And then this is why I'm very much against the whole layer of government baloney. It is not how it works, because what happens is these city reps come in and say, I'm going to take some money from the county, take some money from the state. Oh, look at that. There's some federal funds, tryout funds. Yeah. Yep. And then I'm going to take those funds and then we're going to use them to be able to get our projects done, right? And it's not this concept of everybody has to report to the others like a cake where, the city is beneath the county and beneath the state, it's not how it works. Right. Not how it works in practice. And you can talk to the city officials and they'll tell you that. They're like, yeah, no, I contact the state rep when I need money, right? I go to him and he finances what I'm trying to do. And they love it because they're like, sweet, another project done in my district. That looks great for me. I get to go, when are we going to go, sign the little thing or clip the ribbon or take the photo op, or they love it, right? And the county does the same thing. They do the same thing, but you have to have that focal point that says we're the ones that are going to drive the project to completion. We don't have it. So, all right, let's go through some comments because, and I appreciate it, Joe, because we get a chance. We don't often get a chance to talk about this on this show because we're always talking about small businesses and things like that. Every once in a while, it's kind of fun to talk about some of these things, especially with someone who's put in a lot of work for it and gets it, because people don't always follow that. But some do. So Justine's one of them. She says, took us 2 years post-Sally to get our part back for our kids, right? And look at Gulf Breeze and their population density, Justine, versus Navarre. How many people per square mile? And of course, the anti-incorporation folks are going to come on there and they're going to say, well, that's because they have a bunch more parks and retention ponds and buildings like that. I'm like, exactly.
Yes. So exactly. We need them too.
Exactly. The other thing is, Justine, when we talk about parks, a lot of the research that we did showed how parks can double as sponges for stormwater, right? Yeah. If you plan a park very smartly, it can have a drainage system underneath. We had a little bit of that in the previous park because it had a little pond in there. Yeah. That was just paid over, filled in with dirt, and now we've got what we've got, right? They missed an opportunity to build in more stormwater mitigation in that renovation that they did. It was very frustrating to me. I was like, yes, it's pretty, and my kids love playing on the little jungle gym things.
But it could have been more.
But what about flooding, right? And so some of the best parks in the area in Santa Rosa County and the country are also done with, hey, how are we going to mitigate flooding as we do this? That's the kind of stuff that we want to see. Justine says it's not the same services at all. It's so much more. Infrastructure, public spaces, it's not even close to the same. Correct, right? It's, in the category, like technically the county is providing these services broadly, but where's the Navarre allocation? Where's our specific budget? You're not going to find that. And then where's the dedicated staff that are focusing just on us? That's not how the county's structured. People told me when I first started doing this show, they're like, you should run for county commissioner. I was like, why? So I can get frustrated because 4 other people, have their own priorities and agenda. And that's what Ray, I think, is experiencing up there as our commissioner. He's like, man, it's hard to get anything done when, the other guys are focused on their ears and, get this, responding to the cities that are using a lot of their time. Yeah. So let's see. So Dorothy doesn't understand that. She says we don't want to pay more tax money for the same services. If that was the case, Dorothy, then I wouldn't be for this, right? I wouldn't be out here just saying, hey, I want to pay more taxes for nothing. But do me a favor, go drive around Gulf Breeze. Go visit any of these, even Milton has so much dysfunction. I can't stand the way they conduct their meetings, and there's a lot of unprofessional behavior in how Milton conducts itself. But even Milton, you see more infrastructure, sidewalk paving projects than we have. But Gulf Breeze, to me, really is more of the model city that I would point to. I mentioned Fairhope. There's a lot of others out there as well. Niceville. You could look at a lot of other cities, and that's just in our area. We've talked about St. Augustine and Winter Spring. Right. There's a lot of others. And you see the difference immediately in those areas because they've got city zoning and planning. City zoning and planning is fundamentally different than county.
It is.
So it is not the same. City council doesn't function like the commissioners, Nancy said. That's true. That's also in there. So Dorothy said basically each district would have their own commissioners, just like they now, except the beach appoints theirs and their commission cannot be overrun by the city manager. Yeah, so what Dorothy is talking about is we made specific provisions for the beach because they weren't going to get their own city council person.
Right.
And so we said, okay, you guys really drive a lot of the tourism in the entire county. If we get any of that money, which I think we will, you guys get discretion over that with your committees. And then we want to make sure that your interests are not overridden by the rest of Navarre. So giving them some specific provisions because they don't have their own individual city council person. And then a couple other comments on here. I try to respond to everybody, Joe, so I'm just kind of going through this real quick. But Dorothy said no transparency. Is he kidding? I try to be transparent as possible. I mean, we just did this entire show for an hour, so if there's questions that we're not answering, let me know. Justine said, if we incorporate, does that fix that issue and give us say where our taxes go? Then yes, it gives us a lot more say in where those go. Looks like they went back and forth quite a bit. Okay, and then Elizabeth said, yes, let's keep our money here, please. And that's the best part is that if you have a city and what you're paying into that city, that money is spent in Navarre. Not everybody's going to agree all the time on where what priority they're going to meet, but there's enough widespread consensus on it being infrastructure that it's pretty clear what those immediate priorities are. It's not hard to determine. At least you know what's being spent here. Who's getting more, East or West Navarre? We're still going to have those debates and struggles, but at least it's a place that I can get to after work. I can't get up to Milton to be part of that discussion. You know what I mean? They have a meeting at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday in Milton. There's no way I'm getting to that. I'd love to see that kind of discussion happening here. And I'll give you one example to close, Joe, is there was a lot of discussion, I think this was a couple years ago, there was a lot of discussion about a town center. There's a lot of people who wanted a public space in Navarre, right? They wanted more than just the park that we have. They wanted a grassy area where we could have events and things like that. And they wanted the bridge that would go over it. And Bob Benakis, who owns TC Front Porch, he had a concept for that. Right. And he wanted to get feedback. He was like, how do I do that? He called me up and he's like, how do I do that? He's like, if I go up to Milton, then people got to drive up there for us to hash it out, right? And so I said, let me work with St. Sylvester Church and let's just have a forum so that you can talk to people. I was like, just get some feedback on it. There was 110 people there.
Wow.
Just filled up. And St. Sylvester's huge. But there was people all over who came out for that. And some of them felt very strongly, hey, I don't like this, I'm worried about it. Some of them gave them really good feedback, about where's the parking going to be. Maybe you need to look at Esplanade instead of 98. He got some really good feedback, and it was eye-opening for him. If we had that meeting up in Milton, I would argue it'd be maybe a fraction of those people. Because how are they going to show up?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like we're still going to have struggles in the city. It's not like everything's going to be fixed overnight, but at least it's all of us in Navarre meeting in Navarre to decide the issue for Navarre.
Yeah.
When you go to Milton, you're going to have 5 guys, not a single one of them who live in Navarre, telling you what the decisions. That's your judges, right?
And they've got cities
pushing back, for their priorities. And then you're going to have people in the audience from other places and everything else. And then you're going to have to go up there and make a case based upon, what you know, as opposed to having that being decided by the guy who lives down the street. You know what I mean? And so that's what it's really all about. All right. I think that's about it. So Dorothy, I'll give one last. How much goes into general fund and how much of that in the special? I'll get you an answer on that, Dorothy. I'll probably have some folks from the beach, and we could do a show with them so you can get more of that. Because I think that was a little bit later, Joe, is when we did the study and you were involved in those initial drafts in the first year of that. We had just started negotiations with the beach, and those have been very fruitful as of late. And so those have been things that other folks who are involved in the study have worked on with us. So maybe I'll have some of the leaseholders on here. We'll do a show, and then we can hash out those things. But hey, thanks. I love the comments, y'all. Like I said, we love doing these live shows. We love getting comments like this. We love getting a chance to explain it because, you can talk on Facebook all day long, but getting a chance to do it like this is so much more fun. And getting a chance to introduce you, Joe. And there's so many people who are involved in the study. You're one of several, but I love going through your background and all that stuff. That was a lot of fun. So for everybody else that watched, thank you guys for getting involved with this. Thank you for all the comments. PreserveNavarre.com is our website. I mentioned several of our sponsors. Get involved with Elizabeth Kurz and, the Panhandle Shop, the Veterans Treatment Corps, Chaz and what he's doing with the Virgin Spectrum. A lot of great businesses in Navarre, a lot of great people to get to know in Navarre. We try to showcase them on this show. So if you've got folks that you want us to interview, let us know. We'll be happy to do that. If you got feedback for the show, feel free to reach out to us, preservenavarre@gmail.com. You can hit us up on the website. But we love doing this. Joe, thanks again for your time and being so generous and perspective. Y'all have a great night. We'll see you next Thursday.